You know they say family is everything, but sometimes family can break your heart in ways you never imagined. My name is Eleanor, and at 80 years old I thought I'd seen it all. 2 wars, the Great Depression, raising 4 children as a single mother after my husband died in Vietnam, building a business from nothing and surviving more heartbreak than most people could handle. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened at my own 80th birthday dinner. That night changed everything, and I mean everything. By the end of the evening, I had given away my house, my home of 45 years, to a complete stranger. And you know what? It was the best decision I ever made. Let me take you back to the beginning, because this story starts long before that fateful birthday dinner. It starts with a little girl named Rosa, who worked at Mama's Kitchen, the family restaurant, where we decided to celebrate my milestone birthday. Rosa was different from the other waitresses. She had this light in her eyes, despite the exhaustion I could see weighing on her young shoulders. Every time I came in for my weekly lunch, which had become my routine since my arthritis made cooking difficult, Rosa would remember exactly how I liked my coffee, would ask about my garden, and always had a genuine smile for me. Rosa was 23, working 2 jobs to support her younger siblings after their parents died in a car accident 3 years earlier. She was trying to finish nursing school, but the bills kept piling up. She never complained, never asked for anything. But I could see the struggle in her eyes. She reminded me so much of myself at that age. Determined, hard-working, but drowning in responsibilities that seemed too heavy for such young shoulders to bear. Meanwhile, my own children, Michael, Patricia, James, and Susan, had become strangers to me. Oh, they called on holidays, sent generic birthday cards, but real connection, real love, that had disappeared years ago, replaced by polite conversations about the weather and their busy lives. They lived in different states, had their own families, their own problems. I understood that, I really did. But understanding doesn't make the loneliness any easier to bear. The house I lived in wasn't just a house. It was my sanctuary, my life's work. A beautiful Victorian home that my late husband Thomas and I had bought in 1978 for $40,000. We'd poured our hearts and souls into restoring it. Thomas had refinished every piece of original hardwood flooring by hand. I had planted and tended the garden for 4 decades, watching oak trees grow from saplings to giants that now towered over the neighborhood. Every room held memories: the kitchen where I taught my children to bake, the living room where we opened Christmas presents, the bedroom where Thomas and I shared our dreams and fears. But more than memories, this house had become my financial security. The neighborhood had transformed over the years from a modest working-class area to one of the most desirable locations in the city. My little $40,000 house was now worth $1.2 million. I knew this because my children never let me forget it. The phone calls had started about 2 years earlier. "Mom, that house is too big for you now." "Mom, you're 80. What if you fall down those stairs?" "Mom, you could live so comfortably in a nice retirement community with all that money." Always the house, always the money. Never, "Mom, how are you feeling?" Or, "Mom, we miss you." I wasn't naive. I knew what they were really thinking. They saw dollar signs. They saw their inheritance sitting there, appreciating in value, while I stubbornly insisted on living in it. They wanted me to sell, move somewhere smaller and cheaper, and essentially preserve their inheritance for them. The irony wasn't lost on me. The children I had sacrificed everything for, worked 3 jobs to put through college, were now treating me like an obstacle to their financial future. But I held firm. This was my home. I had earned it, preserved it, loved it. If I wanted to live there until my dying day, that was my choice to make. I wasn't ready for a nursing home or some sterile retirement community where I'd be warehoused with other forgotten elderly people waiting to die. As my 80th birthday approached, I was actually looking forward to it. Surely, I thought, this milestone would bring my family together. Surely they would put aside their concerns about money and property for one night to celebrate their mother, the woman who had given them life and sacrificed her own dreams to ensure they could pursue theirs. I suggested we celebrate at Mama's kitchen. It wasn't fancy, but the food was good, the atmosphere was warm, and I knew Rosa would take good care of us. My children initially protested. They wanted somewhere nicer, more appropriate for such a milestone birthday. But I insisted. It was my birthday, after all. The night of the dinner, I dressed in my best outfit, a navy blue dress that Thomas had always said brought out my eyes, pearl earrings that had been my mother's, and the diamond wedding ring I still wore after 15 years of widowhood. I did my hair at the salon that afternoon and felt more beautiful than I had in years. I was ready to celebrate 8 decades of life, surrounded by the people who should have loved me most. My children arrived with their spouses and my grandchildren, 12 people in total. The grandchildren, ranging in age from 8 to 16, were polite but distant. They barely knew me, and I barely knew them. We were family in name only, connected by blood but separated by years of neglect and indifference. Rosa was working that night, and she made sure our table was perfect. She had even convinced the kitchen to make a special birthday cake. Nothing fancy, just a simple chocolate cake with "Happy 80th Birthday, Eleanor" written in pink frosting. When she brought it out singing "Happy Birthday" with genuine warmth in her voice, I felt more love from this young woman I'd known for 2 years than I felt from my own children. The dinner started pleasantly enough. We ordered our food, made small talk about work and school and the weather. The grandchildren showed me pictures on their phones of their activities, soccer games, school plays, vacations I hadn't been invited to. I smiled and nodded and tried to memorize their faces, knowing it might be months or even years before I saw them again. But then, as the main course was being served, Michael, my eldest son, cleared his throat in that way he did when he was about to say something he thought was important. "Mom," he said, "we've been talking, and we think it's time we had a serious conversation about your living situation." My heart sank. Here? Now? At my birthday dinner? The house is just too much for you. Patricia chimed in, not even looking at me as she cut her chicken. "You're 80 years old, Mom. What if something happens? What if you fall and can't get to the phone? We've looked into some really nice places," James added. "Assisted living communities with activities and medical care right on site. You'd have so much less to worry about." Susan, my youngest, who I had hoped might be my ally, nodded in agreement. "And think about the financial freedom, Mom. You could live so comfortably on the proceeds from the house sale. You could travel, buy things you need, not worry about property taxes and maintenance." I felt the walls closing in around me. This wasn't a birthday celebration. It was an intervention. They had planned this, coordinated their attack. While I had been looking forward to a night of family togetherness, they had been strategizing about how to convince me to give up my home. "I'm not ready to sell my house," I said quietly, hoping to end the conversation before it went any further. But Michael wasn't deterred. "Mom, be realistic. You can't maintain a house that size forever. The yard alone is too much work. And the stairs, those stairs are dangerous for someone your age." "I manage just fine," I replied, my voice getting stronger. "I have a lawn service for the yard, and I've been going up and down those stairs for 45 years without incident." "But for how much longer?" Patricia pressed. We're not trying to be difficult, Mom. We're trying to look out for your best interests. My best interests. As if they had any idea what my best interests were. As if they had bothered to ask me what I wanted, what I needed, what would make me happy in my remaining years. The conversation continued, becoming more insistent, more aggressive. They had clearly done their research. They knew exactly what the house was worth, had even gotten the names of real estate agents who specialized in properties like mine. They had brochures for retirement communities, complete with floor plans and activity schedules. We've even talked to a financial advisor, Michael said, pulling out a folder. Look at these numbers, Mom. You could live like a queen on the interest alone. I looked around the table at these people, my children, my own flesh and blood, and I didn't recognize them. When had they become so cold, so calculating? When had their mother's happiness become secondary to their financial planning? The worst part was that they were doing it all under the guise of caring about me. They wrapped their greed in concern, their selfishness in love. They made it sound like selling my house was the most logical, reasonable thing in the world, and I was being stubborn and unreasonable for wanting to stay in my own home. I said I'm not ready to sell, I repeated louder this time. But Mom, James started. No, I said firmly. This is my birthday dinner, not a real estate seminar. Can we please talk about something else? But they couldn't let it go. For the next hour, as we ate our dinner and made stilted conversation about other topics, they kept circling back to the house. Little comments, casual observations, constant pressure disguised as concern. Did you see that article about elderly people and home accidents, Mom? The property taxes in your neighborhood have really gone up, haven't they? That's such a big house for one person to heat and cool. Each comment was like a small knife, cutting away at my resolve, making me feel guilty for wanting to live in my own home, making me feel like a burden for refusing to liquidate my life's work for their benefit. Rosa, bless her heart, seemed to sense the tension at our table. She checked on us more frequently than necessary, always with a warm smile and a kind word. When she brought me a fresh cup of coffee, she whispered, "Are you okay, Mrs. Eleanor? You seem a little sad tonight." I squeezed her hand and assured her I was fine. But I wasn't fine. I was heartbroken. This was supposed to be a celebration of my life, a time for family and joy and gratitude. Instead, it had turned into a business meeting where my own children were treating me like an asset to be managed rather than a mother to be loved. As the evening wore on, I found myself watching Rosa work. She moved with grace and efficiency, treating every customer with kindness and respect. She remembered details about regular customers, asked about their families, genuinely cared about their well-being. She embodied everything my own children seemed to have forgotten about treating people with love and dignity. Then it happened. The moment that changed everything. We were finishing dessert, that beautiful cake Rosa had arranged, which I could barely taste through my disappointment, when Michael made one final push. "Mom, we really need you to think seriously about this. We've scheduled an appointment for you to tour Sunset Manor next week. It's a beautiful place, and they have an opening." "You scheduled an appointment without asking me?" I asked, incredulous. "We knew you'd resist," Patricia said. "But once you see it, you'll understand. It's really lovely, Mom. They have a library and organized activities and medical care," Susan added. "Round-the-clock medical care." I felt something snap inside me. Something that had been holding on, trying to maintain family peace, trying to be the understanding mother, finally broke. These people didn't love me. They didn't even like me. I was an inconvenience to them, an obstacle to their inheritance, a problem to be solved. I looked around the table one more time at their expectant faces. They were waiting for me to cave, to agree to their plan, to make their lives easier by erasing myself from my own home. They had no idea what that house meant to me, what memories lived in its walls, what comfort I found in its familiar spaces. To them, it was just an asset. To me, it was my life. That's when I made the decision that would shock everyone at that table and change Rosa's life forever. I reached into my purse and pulled out an envelope. Inside that envelope was something I had brought with me for safekeeping: the deed to my house. I had taken it from my safe deposit box earlier that week because I was planning to update my will after my birthday, wanting to make sure all my legal documents were in order now that I was 80. Rosa was walking past our table carrying a tray of dirty dishes from another party. I reached out and gently touched her arm. "Rosa, honey, could you come here for a moment?" She set down her tray and approached our table with that warm smile that had brightened so many of my difficult days. "Of course, Mrs. Eleanor. Is everything okay? Do you need anything?" I stood up from my chair, my movements deliberate and sure. Every eye at the table was on me, confused by this interruption to their carefully orchestrated intervention. "Rosa," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "you have been kinder to me in the past 2 years than my own family has been in the past 20. You remember how I like my coffee. You ask about my garden. You treat me like a human being worthy of respect and care." Rosa looked confused but smiled politely. "Oh, Mrs. Eleanor, you're such a sweet customer. It's my pleasure." I opened the envelope and pulled out the deed to my house. Rosa's eyes widened, not understanding what she was looking at, but sensing something significant was happening. "This," I said, holding up the document, "is the deed to my house. It's worth about $1, $2 million, which I know because my children have reminded me of that fact approximately 1,000 times tonight." The table had gone completely silent. Even the grandchildren had stopped their whispered conversations and were staring at me with wide eyes. My children seem to think I'm too old and too incompetent to live in my own home. I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. They think I should sell it and move to some sterile facility where I can be safely tucked away until I die. They're not concerned about my happiness or my wishes. They're concerned about preserving their inheritance. "Mom, that's not..." Michael started to protest, but I held up my hand to silence him. "Rosa," I said, turning back to the young woman who was now looking genuinely concerned. "You're 23 years old, working 2 jobs, putting yourself through nursing school, and taking care of your siblings. You're one of the most caring, hard-working, genuine people I've ever met. And you know what? You deserve a chance. You deserve a home." I held out the deed to her. "I'm giving you my house." The silence that followed was deafening. Rosa stared at the document in my hands as if it might explode. My children looked like they were having collective heart attacks. The other diners at nearby tables had stopped their conversations to watch this bizarre scene unfold. "Mrs. Eleanor," Rosa whispered, her hands shaking. I don't understand. You can't... I absolutely can," I said firmly. "It's my house, and I can give it to whomever I choose. And I choose to give it to someone who has shown me more love and respect than my own family." The explosion came from all directions at once. "Mom, you can't be serious. This is insane. You don't even know her. She's just a waitress." "Mom, think about what you're doing." But I was thinking clearly for the first time in years. I was thinking about how Rosa's face lit up when she talked about becoming a nurse. I was thinking about how she worked double shifts and still found the energy to ask about my arthritis. I was thinking about how she deserved a chance at the kind of life my own children had taken for granted. "Rosa," I said, ignoring the chaos around me, "there are conditions. You can't sell the house for at least 10 years. You have to finish nursing school, and you have to let me live there with you until I die." Rosa's eyes filled with tears. "Mrs. Eleanor, I can't accept this. It's too much. Your family, my family, I said, looking pointedly at my children, has made it very clear that they don't want me in that house. But maybe you do. Of course I do, Rosa said through her tears. You're the kindest person I know. But Mrs. Eleanor, this is your home, your family's inheritance. My family will inherit what they deserve, I said coldly. Which, based on tonight's performance, is nothing. The argument that followed was unlike anything I had ever experienced. My children threatened legal action, accused me of senility, called Rosa every horrible name they could think of. They said I was being manipulated, that I was having some kind of breakdown, that no rational person would give away $1 million house to a virtual stranger. But Rosa wasn't a stranger. She was the daughter I wished I had raised. She was kind and caring and genuine in ways my own children had forgotten how to be. She saw me as a person, not as an obstacle to their financial plans. The manager of the restaurant came over, drawn by the commotion. Other diners were openly staring now. It was a scene worthy of a soap opera. And I was the star. Ma'am, the manager said nervously. Is everything okay here? Everything is perfect, I said, signing the deed and handing it to Rosa, whose hands were still shaking. I've just given my house to someone who deserves it. Rosa looked at the document in her hands as if it were made of pure gold. Mrs. Eleanor, are you sure? Really, truly sure? I have never been more sure of anything in my life, I said. And I meant it. My children made one final attempt to stop what they saw as my complete mental breakdown. Michael grabbed my arm, trying to get me to sit down and think rationally. Patricia was crying, saying I was destroying the family. James was on his phone, presumably calling a lawyer. Susan was begging me to reconsider, but I was done listening to them. I was done being treated like an inconvenience, done being pressured to make decisions based on their financial interest rather than my own happiness. I was 80 years old, and I had earned the right to live my life on my own terms. Rosa, I said, would you drive me home? I think I'm ready to leave my birthday party. She nodded, still clutching the deed, still looking like she couldn't believe what had just happened. Of course, Mrs. Eleanor. Let me just clock out. As we walked toward the exit, my children trailing behind us, still arguing and pleading and threatening, I felt lighter than I had in years. I had just done something completely impulsive, completely unprecedented, and completely right. The car ride home was quiet. Rosa drove carefully, stealing glances at me as if I might disappear at any moment. The deed sat on the dashboard between us, a piece of paper that had just changed both of our lives forever. Mrs. Eleanor, she finally said as we pulled into my driveway. Why did you do that? Really? I looked at my house, Rosa's house now, with its wraparound porch and the oak trees Thomas and I had planted, the garden I had tended for 40 years, the windows glowing warm and yellow in the darkness. Because, I said, family isn't just about blood. It's about love and respect and caring for each other. And you, sweet girl, have been more family to me than my own children. We sat in the car for a few more minutes, both of us processing what had just happened. Rosa was crying quietly, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the gift she had just received. I was crying too, but not from sadness. I was crying from relief. There's so much I need to tell you about the house, I said. The furnace is temperamental in the winter, and the third step on the stairs creaks, and the roses in the back garden need to be pruned in March. Rosa laughed through her tears. I want to learn everything, every single thing. And there's paperwork we'll need to handle, and lawyers to call, and... I paused, thinking about the explosion that was surely waiting for me on my voicemail, and probably a lot of very angry phone calls from my children. Are you worried about that? Rosa asked. I considered the question seriously. Was I worried? Was I having second thoughts? Would I wake up tomorrow, regretting this impulsive decision that had, effectively, disinherited my own children? No, I said, and I was surprised by how certain I sounded. I'm not worried at all. For the first time in years, I feel like I've done something right. The next few weeks were, as I had predicted, full of angry phone calls and legal threats. My children hired lawyers, demanded competency hearings, accused Rosa of elder abuse and manipulation. They painted me as a confused old woman who had been taken advantage of by a scheming waitress. But the lawyers I consulted assured me that the deed transfer was legal and binding. I was of sound mind, had made the decision freely, and had the right to dispose of my property as I saw fit. My children could contest it, but they would likely lose, especially since I had witnesses to their birthday dinner behavior. Rosa moved in 2 weeks after my birthday. She brought her 2 younger siblings, Maria, 16, and Carlos, 14. And suddenly my quiet house was full of life again. There was music and laughter and the sounds of young people living and growing and dreaming. Rosa kept her promise about nursing school. She switched to part-time work at the restaurant and enrolled full-time in classes. I helped her with her studies, and she helped me with the things that were becoming more difficult. The grocery shopping, the heavy cleaning, the yard work I was no longer able to manage. But more than that, we became a real family. Rosa would come home from school and tell me about her classes, her dreams of working in pediatric nursing, her fears about failing her exams. Maria would show me her artwork and ask for help with her English homework. Carlos would tell me about his soccer games and his plans to study engineering. They included me in their lives in ways my own grandchildren never had. I went to Maria's art shows and Carlos's soccer games. I helped Rosa study for her nursing boards. I taught them all how to tend the garden, how to preserve tomatoes, how to make Thomas's favorite apple pie. In return, they gave me purpose. Instead of rattling around in an empty house, waiting for infrequent phone calls from distant children, I was part of a bustling household, full of love and energy and hope. My biological children eventually stopped calling. They couldn't forgive me for what they saw as my betrayal, my theft of their rightful inheritance. The lawyers told them they had no case, and eventually they gave up their legal challenges. But they also gave up on me. It hurt, of course it did. Despite everything, they were still my children, and I loved them. But I had finally learned that love has to be mutual, to be meaningful. I had spent decades trying to maintain relationships with people who saw me as an obligation rather than a joy. I had confused duty with love, guilt with affection. Rosa graduated from nursing school 18 months after I gave her the house. The whole family, our chosen family, celebrated with dinner at Mama's kitchen, where it all began. Rosa's former co-workers threw her a party, and I was prouder than I had ever been of my biological children's achievements. She got a job at the Children's Hospital, working in the pediatric intensive care unit. It was demanding, emotionally difficult work. But Rosa thrived. She would come home and tell me about the children she cared for, the families she comforted, the small miracles she witnessed every day. "You saved my life," she told me one evening, as we sat on the front porch, watching Maria and Carlos play with the neighbor kids. "You gave me a chance I never would have had otherwise." "You saved mine too," I replied. And I meant it. You gave me a family again. 3 years after that fateful birthday dinner, I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The doctor said I had maybe 6 months, possibly less. My biological children were notified, but none of them came to visit. They sent cards, generic, impersonal cards, but they didn't come. Rosa, Maria, and Carlos rallied around me. Rosa arranged her work schedule so she could drive me to treatments. Maria painted pictures to brighten my bedroom walls. Carlos learned to cook so he could make my favorite meals when the chemotherapy made me too sick to eat much else. They held my hand through the worst of it, celebrated with me when I had good days, and never once made me feel like a burden. When I was too weak to climb the stairs, they moved my bedroom to the first floor. When I couldn't tend my garden anymore, they learned to do it for me, keeping it exactly the way I liked it. I lived for 14 months after my diagnosis, not 6. The doctor said it was remarkable, that my strong will to live had extended my time significantly. I knew better. It wasn't willpower that kept me alive. It was love. Real, genuine, unconditional love from the family I had chosen. I died at home, in my own bed, surrounded by people who truly cared about me. Rosa held one hand, Maria held the other, and Carlos read to me from my favorite book of poetry. It was peaceful and beautiful, and exactly how I had always hoped to leave this world. My biological children came to the funeral. They sat in the back, uncomfortable and out of place, among the crowd of people who had genuinely loved me. Rosa's co-workers, her siblings' teachers, neighbors who had watched our unconventional family flourish, patients' families that Rosa had comforted, who wanted to pay their respects to the woman who had raised such a caring nurse. The obituary Rosa wrote captured who I really was, better than my own children ever could have. It talked about my love of gardening, my decades of volunteer work at the library, my fierce independence, and my belief that family is defined by love, not blood. It mentioned my biological children respectfully but briefly, and focused instead on the life I had built in my final years with the family I had chosen. After the funeral, my children approached Rosa. I wasn't there to see it, obviously, but Rosa told me later what happened. They were cold but civil, probably hoping there might be some other assets they could claim. When they learned that the house was all I had left, and that it was legally and irrevocably Rosa's, they finally accepted that their mother had made her choice. She was a good woman, Michael had said stiffly. We just never understood her. Rosa, who had more grace in her little finger than my children had in their entire bodies, simply replied, "She was the best woman I ever knew. I was lucky to be her daughter." Because that's what she was, my daughter. Not by blood, but by choice. Not by accident of birth, but by mutual love and respect and care. The house that had been the center of so much conflict became a home full of joy. Rosa finished paying off her siblings' college educations. Maria became an art teacher. Carlos became an engineer, just as he'd dreamed. They all stayed close, visiting regularly, bringing their own children to play in the garden I had planted, and Rosa had maintained. Rosa never sold the house, honoring the condition I had placed on the gift. She raised her own children there, in the bedrooms where my children had once slept, in the kitchen where I had taught her to make apple pie, in the garden where we had spent countless hours talking about life and dreams and the future. Sometimes I think about that birthday dinner and what would have happened if I had simply given in to my children's pressure. I would have sold my house, moved to some sterile retirement community, and died alone and forgotten, surrounded by strangers who were paid to care for me. My children would have gotten their inheritance, but they never would have gotten to know the woman who had sacrificed everything for them. Instead, I chose love over obligation, chosen family over biological family, and it made all the difference. That deed I handed to Rosa wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a declaration of independence, a statement that I refused to be warehoused and forgotten, a gift to someone who had shown me that family is something you create, not something you're born into. I gave Rosa a house, but she gave me something infinitely more valuable. She gave me a family that actually wanted me, loved me, and valued me for who I was, not what I owned. And that, my friends, is worth more than any inheritance could ever be. The best part? Rosa still works at Mama's kitchen one day a week. Not because she needs the money anymore, but because she loves taking care of people. She says I taught her that. How to see the humanity in everyone. How to treat people with dignity and respect. How to create family wherever you find love. Sometimes the best decisions we make are the ones that seem the craziest at the time. Sometimes the people who deserve our love the most are the ones we choose, not the ones we're related to. And sometimes, at 80 years old, you get the chance to completely change your life and someone else's life with one bold, beautiful, impulsive act of love. That's exactly what happened to me, and I wouldn't change a single moment of it.